All right, the City of Ferndale Planning Commission meeting of Wednesday, July 6th, 2022 will commence at 6:32. Kyle, will you start us off with a roll call for this evening? Looks like we have a full house tonight.
Sure. Commissioner Hagfors?
Here.
Commissioner Azar?
Here.
Commissioner Hoskew?
Here.
Commissioner Baker?
Here.
Commissioner Foster?
Here.
Commissioner Showalter?
Here.
Commissioner Akers?
Here.
Commissioner Brazen?
Here.
Polka.
Here.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is approval of the agenda. We have one item new business tonight. It's 279 West 9 Mile Road, a mixed-use development. Are there any comments or edits to the agenda for this evening?
I would move that we approve the agenda as presented.
Second, by Brazen.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next, we have approval of minutes for the consideration of the minutes from the June 15th Planning Commission meeting. Any comments or edits to the June 15th minutes?
I would move that we approve the minutes from June 15th, 2022 as presented.
Support.
That is a motion by Baker and support by Councilman Polika. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Next, we have call to audience on their agenda for anyone who would like to speak on any issue that is not on our agenda for this evening. Again, we have that 279 West 9 Mile. It's our only agenda item. For anything other than that item, if anyone would like to come to the stand. Thank you. Yep, if you could just please state your name and address for the record. Welcome.
Thank you. This is my first time doing this. I don't really know the procedure. Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Kelly Eklund, and my family and I have lived at 1103 Withington Street for over 10 years. My property is one of the 4 that is behind the proposed 4-story apartment complex at 1200 West 9 Mile Road. So unfortunately, I just learned about this proposed development from a neighbor about a week ago. And since then, I've been on the website looking over the site plans and listening to the videos from the meetings. So from this, I do know that it was not legally required for residents to be alerted to this proposal due to the fact that the property already is zoned as mixed use. But as a resident that is directly affected by this proposal, I will say that I find this disappointing, and I feel that this showed a lack of consideration for the residents. There's many differences between the current property and the proposed building, and it's frustrating to me that I didn't know about this months ago and that the residents were not able to weigh in earlier in the process. So accordingly, I don't know if changes are still being considered at this stage, but I would appreciate it if the commission would consider my input. Overall, I have 4 concerns with the structure as proposed in the last available drawings that I found online, which were dated May 12th. So number 1 was the overall height of the building. Per the zoning requirements, the building height must be capped at 45 feet. And I know that this building will actually be 51 feet at the top of the parapet. And this difference might not seem like a lot, but as it is directly behind my property, blocking my view of sky and trees, as well as limiting the natural light that reaches my property, this height is a concern to me. Number 2 is balconies. I do know that this was brought up by a neighbor at a prior meeting, but I too would like to request that balconies be eliminated from the north-facing side of the property. There's really nothing to be seen from those proposed balconies other than the yards of the current residents. And as a mom of 2 children, the idea of people sitting on their balconies overlooking my yard makes me uncomfortable. My third item is the privacy wall on the north side of the property. On the latest drawings that I found, there is a 5-foot masonry wall shown on the north side of the property. But during the meeting on May 18th, I do believe it was stated that that wall would be vinyl. So I would like to request that the wall be masonry and a minimum of 8 feet high. So as someone who's already dealt with noise and light issues from the existing building and also two-story apartment complex to the west of the proposed property, I do believe that this is very important for the safety, privacy, and quality of life for the current residents, considering the scope of this new project. And my last issue is the transformer. So the current proposed location for the transformer is directly behind my garage and mere feet away from my back patio. So I'm not an electrician. I don't know what is possible this late in the game, but I would request that every effort be made to move the transformer closer to the new building. And if this is not possible, I am requesting that the transformer be fully insulated and shielded by any means allowable to minimize any potential noise pollution that could affect my yard. So based on what I've learned by reviewing the updated drawings, it does appear that developers are very interested in complying with requested changes, and I do realize that concessions have already been made. I also know, though, that already one of the 4 affected residents has just this week moved, not just from her home, but also out of Ferndale completely, in large part because of this proposal. So I'm hoping that the commission and the developers will take these requests into consideration so that the current residents feel safe and comfortable staying in their homes. And thank you for your consideration tonight.
Thank you, Carly. For a first time, you did a wonderful job.
Sure, absolutely.
You providing some contact information there, Carl. Thank you. Well, we really appreciate the feedback. As part of the process, we will not see we will not likely see that site plan again because it's already gone through a process and it's now to the city. Looks like you've been exchanging contact information with the city so that you can potentially work with them and the applicant on any proposed changes. We at the Planning Commission will not see it again, but we will certainly consider your comments for future development as we do have under our purview in light of residents' concerns for future development.
Okay, and I know that in early June, the same proposals regarding the balcony and the masonry wall were made. So will we be able to discuss that? Do you know? Okay, great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. And Kyle and Roger, we appreciate follow-up on those items as well. Seeing no further people moving to the podium for a call to audience, I will call that to a close and move on to new business, which would be item 5A, consideration of the site plan approval for 279 West 9 Mile Road, mixed-use development. And it looks like we have our city planner, Kyle, who's going to tee up the proposal before moving to our applicant for review and consideration.
Good evening, Commission. So before you, we do have a site plan approval request. This is made by the applicant, Roman Bonoslawski, on behalf of the owner, Brian Kramer. So this is at 279 West 9 Mile, best known as Rosie O'Grady's. This is on the southeast corner of Allen and 9 Mile. Notice that it also fronts onto Troy on the south. This is located in the heart of our CBD zoning district, so that it is surrounded by CBD on the east, with the building directly abutting it, and also across the street on both Allen and 9 Mile. It also borders the Ferndale Municipal Parking Garage, also known as the DOT, which is currently rezoned to PUD. I'd like to note that this site recently came to the Commission in July of 2021. It did get approved there. So what you're seeing here is a similar scope to that, but expanded vertically. So last year, this project was approved for an expansion on the first floor. So as you can see, the footprint of the property is a square. There's some outdoor patios here on the southwest side. There's some unenclosed area on the south side. So as part of the 2021 approval, that area was enclosed, and there was a proposed second floor of 10 apartment units. Since then, they've changed the plan slightly. So the first floor is to remain primarily unchanged from the 2021 approval. So you can see the enclosure and the expansion of the restaurant space. So the first floor is proposed for 2 restaurant concepts, roughly split down the middle with a pedestrian passageway. To get access to the apartment units, we do have a residential lobby here that's accessed off of Troy. What has changed on the floors above is that the second floor is now just on the western half of the building rather than the footprint of the entire structure. And we've also increased the total unit count from 10 to 28. So the second floor it's only on the western half of the footprint, and it also has an outdoor rooftop deck. Third floor is a continuation of just on the western half. And the fourth floor is set back 15 feet. Our ordinance does require that any structure that's above the third floor does have to be set back 15 feet. The applicant did include this setback on the Allen side and also a portion of the Troy side, which creates a functional outdoor balcony. I believe this is accessed by anyone in the building, or any of the residents, rather. I'll let the applicant speak to that. The fourth floor has 4 2-bedroom units here on the western half of the corridor. The bedrooms for those are actually on the 5th floor, so there's something of a 2-story penthouse for those units. So the entire building is 69 feet, which is permitted by right. You can go up to 70 in this zoning district. We do have 28 units. Here are the elevations. It's primarily brick, precast stone. We do have some wood and some metal accents. I've noted in the staff report, they're mostly close with the required percentages. So for us, on the base, you do have to have 75% on all sides of a primary material, and then you can have up to 25 of a secondary material. For the upper floors, the ratio for that switches to 50-50. So there's a breakdown in your staff report of what that looks like. They're a little bit out of the requirements, but the Planning Commission can accept these as is. I would say the one that is the most out of sync with the requirements are the eastern face for the upper floors. So this is the face that's going to be facing another building, but it's still partially visible for people walking down like 9 Mile or Troy. There's no landscaping in sight, so the applicant is requesting payment in lieu for the trees. This would be 8 trees. This same request was made in 2021. I'd also like to take a quick moment to discuss the parking. So CBD generally does not require any parking. The only exceptions are when you are creating new expandable space or you are creating upper level residential. So they're creating 28 units. Our parking requirement for that type of use is 1 unit or 1 space per unit, regardless of the number of bedrooms. So they're looking at 28 parking spaces there. And as for the new non-restaurant space that has been enclosed, so this is the area of the first floor that would not be counted as restaurant currently today, but would now be used as such. That's about 751 square feet, which is about 8 spaces. So they are making requests for 36 spaces in accordance with the parking waiver that the Planning Commission can choose to deny, approve or deny in part. And I would also like to note that 32 spaces were waived for the site in 2021. Those do not carry over. They're tied to the project. They have included bicycle parking. If you notice on the first floor, they have an interior corridor, the substantial number of interior enclosed bicycles. So with that in mind, I'd like to turn it over to the applicant. I don't know, Roman, if you have anything else to add. I do think you have some, okay, I can pass those out if you'd like to add anything.
That works.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. Roman Bonislawski from Brown and Roman Architects, representing Brian Kramer. It's interesting what a year will do to a project once it's approved, and once you bring on professional contract trades, and once you work out the schematics of how you stage the project, how you build it, and what the cost ends up being for it. And in fact, there's something to be said for the density that a project of this type could afford us. There's two major moves that we've made. The first being taking the project and creating a slightly more marketable product. There was a lot of backlash against some of the things we were proposing. Originally looking at it as a point of simplicity to try to just build one floor over the entire structure. As it turns out, it makes much more sense for us, especially with the infrastructure that's in the Rosie's building to begin with, and the opportunity to take that eastern half of Rosie's and develop a project that will then be unencumbered with all of the logistical issues that the existing mechanicals of those spaces provide, not to mention the existing structure. But then readdress the project in such a way that the pedestrian via, which we've always been huge proponents of, provides us the opportunity to look at that western portion of building and basically remove it. And by doing so, a brand new approach is created with a brand new economy, a brand new logistical method of delivering the project throughout, and providing something that we think is even more important than just the reality of being able to build a project at a reasonable cost and ending up with something that you're very proud of and that will be the destination killer for that specific type of product in the market, is that we believe that this, in the center of the CBD at that specific location, will now have the stature that I think the board previously alluded to, the opportunity for something that was a little more significant. In our approach, it's been wonderful working with Kyle, working through some of our logistics. We had earlier versions where we didn't quite understand the ordinance sufficiently with regards to the setbacks. Once finding out the requirement just along 9 Mile, we believe that we could provide a much nicer expression for the building and a better presence on the street by actually being able to continue that setback, which we've maintained 15 feet on 9 Mile, 15 feet on Allen, and 14 feet on Troy. It's not a requirement on Troy, but we were able to come close on that. That opportunity to present as a 3-story building on the corner with the setback 2-story component on top, we think will be very significant in town. This solution also takes away a bit of awkwardness as related to the existing building adjacent to us on the east end. There's a situation there where that apartment building has windows directly on their western wall. This now creates a situation where we have a buffer between that building and ourselves, knowing that the opportunity for some future development at that time would also present itself, and it would be terrible to limit that opportunity in the future. In our case, with regards to the materials, we have rethought what the building should feel and look like. As Kyle had mentioned, the basic floor plan on the ground floor plane has remained very similar to before, although it's been tweaked generously. There's always been a concern and consideration of what happens along Allen as the sidewalk pinches. Our current version, although does have a slight pinch point of 5.5 feet, which occurs maybe 50 yards back from the intersection, we have opened up the corner much more. In fact, we previously were indicating a revolving door, which used space much differently at that corner. Now we have an octagonal entry where the entry actually allows for a lot more pedestrian traffic to occur right at that intersection. And it's slightly more generous at 7.5 feet until it finally pinches down at the 5.5-foot point, or 5-foot point at its very tightest point on Allen. It expands as you go to the south also. So we were considerate about that. Also, as Kyle had mentioned, the floor plate has remained very, very similar to where it was before. We had just a few more bicycles to contend with, because unlike your parking requirements where each unit requires one car, unfortunately the bike parking is determined by number of bedrooms, and so we've gone through and in lieu of just creating a terrible condition, we find ourselves luckily with a 7-bike rack out on 9 Mile that exists right now, the opportunity to add another 7-bike rack on Troy Street, and then taking the balance of all those and using alternating heights wall-mounted storage systems, we're able to house the balance of 23 bikes. Or Kyle, you could help me with the numbers exactly. There was a freak out for a while on that, but at the cost of a small office and a bathroom, we were able to get the internal storage for the bicycles. This also provided us a secondary opportunity of creating a meter room, which took an unsightly component off the exterior of the building and managed to house it inside. Another good thing about this plan, by being able to readdress the layout of the units and providing full elevatoring and stairs both at the front and the rear of the building, at the 9 Mile and Troy side of the building, we were also able to incorporate an internal trash control system that resolves itself on the ground floor plate. And if you were to look, you could see that it's behind the square tower at the bottom of the plan. There's a large rectangle within a large rectangular room. Is that a pointer? Yeah, that'll help a lot. That button right there. This is a rolling dumpster that's housed inside of a trash room with an overhead coiling door, and that happens to fall at the bottom of a double trash chute, which works itself completely through the building and gives us temporary trash storage for the commercial functions there, which we all utilize the commercial dumpsters that are next to the dot at the eastern end of the dot. What's interesting too, could you forward this to the second floor? There you go. What's interesting also is by having the opportunity to not build over that portion of Rosie's that simplifies dramatically, we're able to come in and make the appropriate structural modifications. There, we happen to have structure directly underneath this. The thought that we're able to provide an amenity in a situation that you don't find very frequently, utilizing this wonderful 12-foot by 40-foot shipping container pool that's 4 feet deep with a glass front on it, and incorporating that into a small raised deck, which then using an AZEK fencing material, and I just realized I didn't include a piece of AZEK on that. That's the only material you don't see on that. But the opportunity to present a screen wall function that is the backdrop to that deck and pool area, and a glass rail that would be along the very front, right behind the existing Rosie's parapet. The thought of being able to incorporate that type of amenity for the building, even including interior bathrooms specifically for that function, which resolves nicely on that floor, was a huge amenity for the project. As we go down to the next floor, and I saw him do this, so I could do it the next time. Operating with me. There we go. When we get to the next floor then, from this point on, this third floor is the last floor that occupies the same footprint as the ground level does. This building, and this is maybe more information than you need, but I'm getting close to being finished, so I won't keep you much longer. The building's designed with the interior structure in such a way that the front of house and the bedrooms in both cases create our opportunity for the second structure to come through and pick up the entire portion of building that is above that third floor deck level that's recessed back. So everything that we're proposing, that we're showing you here, has now been vetted from the standpoint of constructability and from a realistic budget approach to the project. I believe it also accomplishes the inherent goal of creating something very important for downtown Ferndale, right in the heart of downtown Ferndale. And The project consists primarily of one-bedroom units. So on the second floor, we have 10 one-bedroom units. On the third floor, we have 9 one-bedroom units, and where I didn't need the bathroom for the pool function up front, we were able to configure a secondary bedroom, so that's the first 2-bedroom unit. And on the fourth floor, which page down, yes, I'm almost there. Well, there we are. And on the fourth floor, what we're able to do is the back portion of building, this portion of building back here, utilizes the same floor plan layout that the previous floors had from below. And the front portion, or the western portion then, creates the ground floor condition of 2-story units, 4 2-story units. And this ground floor consists of the living room, kitchen, a small bathroom, and a stair, and a closet, basically. And as Kyle had mentioned, the upstairs then, on that 5th floor, page down, scroll down just a touch more. Here we go. I'm talking to myself, thank you. And so then what we end up with, the opportunity on this floor, is that we have basically all glass wall here and an all glass wall there, with a bedroom on the east side and a bedroom on the west side. Addresses all those things that we had to contend with from social media, from reviews of the original presentation in front of this board. So what we ended up with then is a project that, starting with the Ferndale side, preserves the eastern portion of the existing Rosie O'Grady's building, but in that case also removing the ephes cornice that was installed above and the other decorative features, the stone, bringing it back to its original brick. And it's a very nice counterpoint to what's happening directly beyond us. This is the area that I mentioned before that houses the pool back in that area right there. And there will be shrubbery, trees and planters and chaise lounges and trash facilities, direct access to the interior directly to a bathroom. And then the balance of the building is dealing, on this facade particularly, the larger expanse areas of the project consist of brick. And the brick sample, as you see right there. The bottom portion of the building will all be precast stone. And the reason that we're opting for a precast stone instead of a natural stone is because there's an integral projecting cornice that runs its way around, because the balconies also end up projecting out 2 feet. And so this cornice comes out 1.5 feet within that. It's an incorporated design feature. By using a precast material, we can first of all control the color and the texture and make it look exactly as we want to, but we're able to have these components fabricated in such a way that they hang off. And then the trickier aspects of the building, as we get into our curved corners, all go to an aluminum box panel system. I happen to include an actual aluminum sample from box panel manufacturers, and next to it you'll see the other small metal sample. It happens to be a Marvin window. We're proposing the use of Marvin Magnum double hung windows, a very high quality window, residential in nature, with integral guards on the interior of the apartment, on the exterior of the apartment, by the means of black stainless cables that provide a safety guard in order not to fall out of the windows when open. But the thought of being able to be in downtown Ferndale, right on the street, the opportunity to open a window and be in a space where you're not limited to a 4-inch opening of a casement window as you are in a hotel. So the thought of being able to get the excitement of providing something so distinct and in town and in the heart of town, and that you can actually be a part of town with that, would be very important for us. This project is most significant as seen on the Allen Road elevation right here. We are still proposing A&P Restaurant, Atlantic and Pacific, which will be a destination killer for a seafood restaurant that I guess Joe Muir's would be the other name you could actually mention in that category. But this, again, being of the bent, reflecting the attitude of what Ferndale is, the culture of Ferndale, the hipness of Ferndale, for goodness sakes, something that sets it apart from so many cities around us. a beautiful restaurant meeting all the height requirements for ceilings and everything working beautifully through the building. In this case, as I mentioned, there were some issues dealing with the mechanicals of the existing building. Here, because we were pre-planning it, we were able to work out all of our chases and shafts through the building in such a way that our overall building height, where all of these chases coalesce up at the very top of the building, includes a 5-foot-high masonry and aluminum box panel screen wall that goes around the entire project, which is the brunt of the mechanical equipment associated with the restaurants down below. The top of the actual first, second, third floor is, again, a guard wall that's 42 inches high at that point surrounding those balconies. And Kyle, as nice as it would be to say that that's available for all the patrons, that is in fact part of the cell of the two-story penthouse above, because we've already gone out of our way to make the amenity having an outdoor public space component with the pool for the building residents in general. And technically, we were able to work out the stairs in such a way that also didn't, at one point we were almost there, but we had a stair tower in the front that couldn't meet the 15-foot requirement. With a little bit of manipulation, we were able to bring that all together. We believe that bringing in all the sides of the restaurants, of the upper floors, is a better architectural treatment for the building when all is said and done. And when you really think about it, because we did a lot of study on this, when you're across the street on 9 Mile, directly across the street from this, you can almost picture it, you'll be seeing the top portion of the 5th floor of that structure because of its setback. So it was important for us to, in lieu of just having that terminate in a rectangle, in a nondescript rectangle, there'd be a small exposed crown detail on that building by means of an open trellis that's not overly dense or populated in the same no maintenance required metal finish that would be had up there. I believe, Kyle, there were 4 items you wished me to address. One was the width on Allen Street, which I've mentioned the dimensions of the walk from the intersection going back. The trash control system that we've incorporated into the building itself. The mechanical screening of the roof. So full disclosure again, I'll just point out to everybody, I'll go back to this elevation right here. We are covered from a mechanical screening standpoint for all the equipment that'll be there, and for all equipment that's currently on the roof of Rosie's up through the back of the building. Now we're adding the 25 feet to the back of the building. And should we need it, I can add a secondary screening component, but as of where all the equipment is right now, the only place you could view it will be from the dot itself, and even if I put a screen wall against that wall, you'll still be able to view it from the dot because the screen wall is only required to be to the height of the actual equipment. So I'm happy to answer any questions. This is months in the remaking after Brian spent months with tower construction going through every opportunity to build our previous version. We hope that you, like us, can see the benefits that we're offering the city, and happy to take any questions or comments on it. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the overview. I just wanted to mention for the commission's knowledge, since I didn't remember, I thought maybe someone else might not either, but just to review the minutes from last year's in terms of the parking reduction motion. So we did approve the parking reduction request of 32 off-street parking with the findings that the convenient municipal off-street and on-street spaces are located within 1,000 feet that have the capacity to handle additional parking, expectation of walk-in business due to sidewalk connections to adjacent residential neighborhoods or employment centers. The site design incorporates pedestrian connections to the site and on-site pedestrian circulation, providing safe and convenient access to the building entrance. Sorry if I misread that a little. Availability of other forms of travel such as transit, bicycling, and rideshare. And for that, the applicant will work with the city to provide off-street parking for residents through the public parking system as available. So just a reminder of that motion. Anyone want to start with any comments or questions? Thank you. I don't see anyone in the room today, but if there was anyone from the public that would like to speak on this topic, now would be the time. And now I will ask the commission. Thank you for the reminder, Commissioner Showalter, our vice chair.
I have a question about the container pool. Does the container pool house all the mechanical and everything within the pool itself? Because I didn't see a pool mechanical room anywhere.
The pool is actually built into a 4-foot elevated deck with a deck around the entire back. And the portion of deck closest to the building houses all of the mechanical equipment directly beneath it.
And looking from the top of the existing roof membrane is to remain, right?
That's correct.
Is that a modified bitumen roof?
I think it is. I'm not sure if it's torched down or if it's actually a built-up roof on that.
Do you know about the chemicals, how if chlorine and modified bitumen go well together? Because I'm sure there's going to be a bit of splashing, and I know chlorine is really bad for...
The portion in the front is getting new membrane beneath the pool, period, because that roof deck is being rebuilt for the structural requirement. We have a 100-pound live load I got to meet out there.
Yeah.
So we're actually rebuilding that portion, and I thought I had mentioned that where it's convenient because that all happens within the first 2 structural rest out the front of the existing roof. But yeah, that's probably for a slightly smarter brain than mine, but we would get the right people involved in getting that put in place.
Okay.
I actually have a question for Mr. Kramer. I do notice that there's the year-round patio on the first floor for the restaurants and with balconies. I was just wondering if you had, I know a big reason for wanting to enclose Rosie or expand Rosie's, why you came to us in the first place, was to get rid of the outdoor areas. Any concern about adding those and continuing to incorporate like outdoor areas into the site plan? Just since I know that there was an
Are you talking
issue.
about the pool area?
The
Or
pool
are you
area
talking about the 4th story?
First floor.
and the southwest corner, there's a enclosed like all-season patio
For the
For
restaurant.
restaurants.
for the
You're
restaurant.
referring specifically to that portion that Kyle is pointing to right there.
To that portion, to the balconies, to kind of all of it, just as a,
So there is a huge expectation for outdoor dining. The most successful, we do a lot of restaurants, the most successful restaurants have an outdoor dining component. Even enclosing it for seasonal enclosure, it still wants to have a feeling that you're participating in an outdoor experience. So the zoning requirement, having us push back the building for the floors up above, leaves us with a technically competent, sealed, waterproofed, deck paved area. So that's natural for us to provide that as an amenity for the units up above. And then the one thing that Brian's taking 2 risks in the project. The first is parking. We're trying to offer a product that is not available anywhere else. And what's the only thing that you're really rolling the dice on is that it doesn't have internal parking on it. Thank you, Ferndale, for building the dot directly behind us, and we oriented the entrance of the unit directly across the street from the dot. Best of both worlds right there. But there's still a risk in that because when compared to other things that are available, that's the one thing you're kind of rolling the dice on. And the other is knowing that when you introduce an outdoor component for public use, such as the pool deck, it's a huge amenity for the residents and it's a huge pain in the ass for you. That's something you have to police, you have to keep clean, you have to maintain, you have to provide all those services for. So those are the 2 elements that Brian is stepping out on to, first of all, get the number of units and the finality of design that we've been able to provide, and the second is to provide that one piece of public amenity for the residents up above. But good question, because yeah, it's a pain to deal with, to maintain and everything else, but it offers so much benefit that it's worth that hassle.
Thank you. Yeah, it certainly is packed with amenities. It looks like a fun place to live. Just to the note about the dot, I know that the dot currently has capacity, and that is likely where a lot of the residents will park. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page, that I don't believe that we have the parking permits currently already established with the city, so we can't make the assumption that there will be parking at the dot. I know that if the residential and office portion, is there going to be office portion? Just residential? Potentially. That will take up excess space in the dot. By the time that this comes about, this applicant will have to work with the city directly about those parking passes, et cetera. So I just want to make sure that, although it is very likely that the residents can park at the dot, that is not actually a direct or assumption that we should be making.
Through the chair, I've got 2 quick questions and 1 comment. The first, my question about how the balcony on the top of the 3rd story worked was answered, thank you, and about sort of that 42-foot high wall around the balcony, and that it's restricted to the penthouse, and so that answered all my questions. I wondered if it was a big party balcony, but it's an amenity for the higher end units, which makes total sense, thank you. I wanted to make sure that the applicant was aware that there is residential proposed on the side of the dot, which would mean potentially you would have another building of about the same height looking toward your residence. So just to make sure that you guys are aware of that, okay? We talked about those materials. 2 questions. One is for the container pool. You explained a bit about the deck, makes more sense now, thank you. So it's kind of up on a riser to get up to the side of the container. Will it be ADA accessible? Is that steps up to the deck, or can it be ramped? Is there a way that people can access that pool if they can't do steps?
So a ramp can be worked out around one side. What we're looking at right now is there are alternate methods of meeting ADA accessibility for the pools, and it's simply by matter of a small lift, and it's not a passenger lift, it's a sling lift. I have a handicapped son, so I've used them many times.
That was actually my next question, was about lifts. Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
and so it's a sling lift that's used in those types of pools, and it's very convenient to use.
Thank you. Thank you for being proactive about that. Then the last question is, I wasn't able to tell from the construction drawings, you talked about the sidewalk challenge along Allen, which we're all aware of, and that whole side has sort of this city right-of-way and city infrastructure challenge with the street light and the pole, and some of it was on Brian's property, and some of it was city, and there was it was complicated the last time Brian did an expansion, and I wanted to see if the conversations have started yet. We've got new city staff, so I mostly wanted to make sure they were aware that is just a complicated corner.
It is.
Yeah.
Are you finished with your question?
I'm finished.
Okay, well, let me tell you how complicated.
It was mostly a comment, because I can't imagine you have an answer for it yet,
So,
but it's I just know
what
it's
I
complicated.
could point out to you is, since our first attempt, we've also been working very closely with Nowak and Frost, the civil engineers on the project, and ends up being that there's many challenges that we're
Yes.
facing,
Yes.
and we've worked them out. And
Wonderful.
I'll point quickly, if I'm back on the ground floor plane, there is a foot difference of elevation between the northern side of the building and the southern side of the building.
Okay.
That starts things off. There are 4 to 5 inches difference elevation at this point versus the VIA location right there. So our plan actually has accommodated all the grade differences, and the only point of difference from the previous version with regards to this floor plan is that you'd see that on this back corner, this portion of the indoor-outdoor space that we have right there, that's raised up on a 2 6-inch riser pedestal. And by doing that, number one, it brings us up off the street in that little bit of a crowded corner in the service area that ends right there. But it also allowed us to maintain remember I mentioned we're tearing down that portion from the existing, from where the VIA goes through to towards the west, because this portion of building will sit approximately 6 inches lower than that portion of building, which accommodated our entry at this point, which we were able to get with a ramp going up between the bathrooms at this point and a ramp for the 2 points of difference in the floor elevations here. Our stairs are unaffected because the stair can resolve itself onto the floor level that it must, and the rear entry stair, which honestly is a foot lower than the front of the building, the residential entry actually enables us to come in right at sidewalk level, right into an elevator and a stair tower. So, yeah, there was a lot of stuff going around that building that had to be resolved, and we were able to do it partially exterior and partially interior because of the new opportunity to just trash half the building.
Through the chair, I just know that there was some give and take between the building owner and the city last time about where infrastructure was placed or moved or housed, and I wanted to see if there was any anticipation that the city was going to need to relocate any major infrastructure, signals, streetlights,
Am I
anything like
able to
that.
blow this up for her? So this is the Noack and Frau's footprint that shows the existing conditions with the proposed entry
Yep.
of the building. If you could zone in on the northwest corner where that condition is, yes.
Ah, there it is.
So there, you could see all the components as they exist in that corner.
All right.
So, yeah, we were able to work that out too.
Thank you.
Thank
It's a
you.
tricky corner.
Further, Commissioner Baker?
No, that was the little dot I was looking for, but that I didn't see.
Anyone?
I was just waiting for others. So I think my first question is to Kyle. So at the last meeting on this project, we approved 32 parking spaces for a 10-unit apartment building, but now we've added 18 more units, but we're only adding 4 more parking spaces?
I was so confused by this too. I think they actually only needed 23, but we approved 32. Because I went through the site plan approval process.
Yeah, I don't remember
For the,
it being 32. I thought it was, I thought it was like in the low 20s. So I don't know, did someone,
May I look back at the minutes?
So the minutes say 32. We did approve the 32.
or was it mistranslated? Was the 3 and the 2, someone typed it and it should have been 23?
I can go
And
back
someone-
to the packet.
The packet, why? Okay, well, good. That's a good question
What
because
was the date? I'll go back to the packet.
June 21. I've got the packet open.
What was the parking requirement for the office?
5 units, or 5 spaces rather.
That'd be about the same or less than the restaurant.
So it was 8, 5, and 10. Hold on.
Were you here with us, Kyle?
Oh, it
You
is?
weren't.
So it
Okay,
was-
that was before.
23 spaces were required per the packet.
I wonder if there's a translation error. in there.
I think there was a translation.
Oh, that's a good question. I didn't think about the transposal of numbers. I thought we might have potentially.
I don't know why we would have added more. It doesn't make
I
sense
feel
to
like we
me.
have done that on one site plan in the past, recent history. Or,
You have a bigger waiver than required?
I mean,
because there might have been a question about what we would actually need.
I don't know, I have a note that says that when we talked about the parking passes for it, that each bedroom will be provided with a parking pass,
As opposed to one
one per
pass per
unit.
unit.
That's all the, so
That could
unfortunately,
change the numbers a bit if it was a lot of 2 bedrooms.
unfortunately, this is one of those where we had we didn't have a lot in the minutes. We could listen to the recording. The bedrooms would have been, they were 10 one-bedroom though, weren't they?
Were they 10 2-bedrooms?
Oh.
Hard to remember anything.
That would be 32.
Your note is about bedrooms, that would
Yeah.
make sense then.
Well, we cleared up a little bit of the muddy waters. Okay, so my next question is, the west balconies, how much are they overhanging the sidewalk? And is it overhanging the city sidewalk, or is the building set back so it's only overhanging the zero lot line?
So on this plan, this, once again, is the Noack and Kraus civil plan that shows our footprint, and it shows the property line on the side. We're coming out to the property line. The balconies are designed, and I'll take you to that plan. They set in 2 feet into the building and 2 feet out of the building, resulting in a 4-foot balcony.
Okay.
So we are stepping back. Again, that was part of our goal always, to try to maintain that extra space along Allen.
Okay. In your drawings, or I'm sorry, in your conversation with us, you talked about a mechanical room,
Yep.
but I have yet to find it.
I spoke to, hold on, first of all, I need you to back for a full.
It's page 6.
Okay, thank you.
There's one room that has no identification right behind the bathrooms. Is
Yes,
that your
here.
mechanical room?
So right now, currently, this, behind the bathrooms, right here.
Okay.
This space is the existing Rosie O'Grady's electrical, fire riser, water heater, mechanical room for the entire footprint complex of the building. Behind that space, which was right here,
The trash room.
spoke to a trash room. But there are no other mechanical rooms in the space but for the primary mechanical room that.
Okay, so where are all the utilities for the apartments going to be? The water, electrical?
So all of the meters end up coming in right here. So our bicycle storage room, what I mentioned to you, was on this wall.
Okay.
I have 23 bicycles up and down, and on this wall, we have all the meters for the services for all of the units up above.
Okay, electrical, water, all that.
Electrical,
Yes.
gas, electric, and water.
Okay.
And then, last thing is, we are, currently, there's an electrical transformer that's sits right about there at the back of Rosie's building, and it's being relocated to this location right here.
I noticed that. Is the bike room then going to be locked? Only residents will have access to that bike room?
Residents will have access, as will the utility companies have access.
Yeah, but it's not going to be the general public.
Oh, it
General
won't.
public, okay.
And it's worked out. There's an airlock at the back right here. There's the inner airlock wall, and by key card, you're able to get, you can't get into this space, you can't get into that space, but you can come right into the bicycle storage room. You see it? There's the expanded airlock for the via entry at the south end.
Okay, so only residents are going to be able to enter that? I thought this was a walkthrough for the general public.
We're talking about after hours. Access into the room itself during operating hours when the VIA is open to everybody, that's by key card. You can only come in if you're a resident and you have a bikes there, or if you're a utility person.
Okay.
After hours, if the restaurants are closed or in the middle of the night, we have a secondary set of locked doors that differentiate those
Gotcha.
three spaces.
Gotcha, okay. Back to my notes. The container pool, so I've heard repeatedly you say that it's a public amenity. Does that mean that the general public can use it, or it's just for the residents?
It's a
Okay.
public amenity for the residents of the
Well,
building.
I would argue that that's a private amenity.
And that's a
because
private
it's-
amenity for the residents.
Because a public, you'd mean, I'd be able to go up there and utilize that space, so.
That ain't gonna
it's-
ever
Yeah,
happen.
that ain't gonna happen. So I just want to be clear on that, that it's a private amenity for the residents.
I wasn't trying to represent anything but that, and I'm sorry for.
That's okay. And you said that you're rebuilding the roof of
The roof
Rosie's? Because I was
structure.
gonna say, you're getting 10,000 gallons of water in there. The last thing I think I want to be able to, I don't want to be sitting under it thinking it's gonna pour rain down on me.
I just did one in Charlevoix up on the third floor roof, right on Bridge Street, right in downtown Charlevoix. It's only a 12-foot version of it, and this is a 40-foot version of it. But it's a very well-designed unit. It's completely contained. It just had utility spikes that come up to it, and you're able to run the equipment right next to it. It's a really sweet unit.
Yeah.
And there's even a glass divider where the last 8 feet is truly a sauna, spa, not a sauna, but a spa component at the end of the pool with a balance of a lap pool. Shallow, but safer.
And my last item is, I believe you're identifying it on your on your layout there, there's two circles at the very bottom southwest corner. The one closest to the building is the utility pole.
Yes, oh, so.
Yeah,
good point.
the one a little off below is the
That's
city lamp.
that's correct.
Yep, and
That
that
is
one's the utility pole.
That's a utility pole right there, and there's another utility pole that shows up on the civil drawing that's right in this opposite.
Just past, yeah, just past.
That's
Now,
correct.
you're aware that those wires are going to be right across the balcony.
We are aware that there's some mitigation to be done to that. Our engineer is aware, and we know Edison doesn't move fast, but there is some correction to be made, because they're treed structures. Both of those poles are
Yeah.
T's on it.
Yeah,
that
and
you have to
there's,
count.
there's support for that pole that go along Allen that are right on the property, actually.
It's just
Mr.
off.
Kramer's
It's-
property.
It's right off of the property line.
Yeah, but I mean, the wires come down, so whoever's in that balcony is gonna have support wires coming down in front of their
Well,
balcony.
we've got that entire area so that you know, that entire back area right here, because of the current power feed into this utility room, that transformer sitting right there. We've got a primary lead to replace the relocation. We have the secondary lead to replace from the new proposed transformer location to our existing cabinet on the interior of the utility room, plus the primary lead to that transformer location. So we're already dealing with some electrical issues back there, and we are aware of it.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean, if you're gonna relocate those poles or whatever you have to do, it's just gonna affect that West Troy. It's just gonna, you know,
Understood.
okay. That's all I have.
While we're in that area, I had a question about the trash room.
Yes.
So having worked actually for Rosie O'Grady's some time ago, and just in restaurants and Pops actually in general, the trash room strikes me as kind of small for the restaurant and for the residential. But I also had a question about how you're going to move a 10-yard container around that corner through
Oh, it's not a
the two-
10-yard container. It's being emptied a lot. I think we agreed that it was a 4-yard container.
Okay, so
It's a
it's one of
rolling
those like
4-yard
plastic
container.
roll-offs?
It's a large plastic roll. It's a large rectangular wheeled plastic rollout, and we designed it with a roll-up coiling door. And the area, there's approximately 12 feet between the end of that dumpster and the coiling door. That's just temporary storage of trash so that we're not schlepping things across to the primary dumpster next on the east side of the dot right there.
Okay, in that case, since it's so small, do you have any concerns about the the frequency that it will need to be emptied and pushed around that corner, especially if it's the entrance for the private dining room or for residents with bicycles and that sort of thing?
The necessity of doing business, you know, you could solve so many problems at one time. The fact that we were able to deal with all the internal trash logistics, getting it into the building, having it at a convenient location regarding the interior functioning of the restaurants, something has to give. So are you concerned about it? Yeah. Does it have to be kept clean? Absolutely. Is that, you know, an important, that rear via entry, we know, we're providing it because we know it's important. People are parking back there, you know, to get up to 9 Mile, and the thought that they can pass through our building to do that is very important to us. So yeah, that's one of the less desirable outcomes of the plan, but the only one logistically we can make work. I'm being honest with you. There were more than 100 problems to solve on this project, and it comes down to a couple of things at the end, like the T-pole power poles that exist at both ends, our location of the transformer, and the fact that the only way I could work out a nice trash room while accommodating elevators and stairs to all the units up above was through a little 90-degree turn that I got to take right in front of the via entry to the building.
Understood. I do trash engineering, that's why it's near and dear to my heart. So,
What can you recommend based on the 100 problems I just described?
well, I'm not the architect, so. I did my second question, we had briefly discussed, was how, if any thought had been put into how the construction was going to progress logistically,
So-
with Troy Street being pavers versus a heavy-duty concrete or asphalt that could withstand a crane load, that sort of thing.
So, as I had mentioned earlier, Brian's already been working with Tower Construction on the first round of plans. I unfortunately, and I should thank my insurance company, cannot be responsible for means, methods, and procedures as it relates to the staging of this type of project. There have been things discussed that will have to be discussed with the city. I mean, currently, we know that the residential end of the dot is not being built. We're considering the proximity of that there may be some opportunity to engage with the city to be able to use that as a staging area. Beyond that statement alone, I truly can't speak to it because I'm not allowed to, basically. And I haven't been privy to the discussions that Brian had previously with Tower. We understand staging is the biggest problem. One of the things we're considering is the opportunity. This is proposed as a podium design, meaning we are using steel with a concrete deck, and from that point on, but for a steel skeleton that will travel up to capture the perimeter loads of the upper two-story penthouse components up above. It's all wood construction, and if you've studied the plans, we've gone through great lengths to make it as standardized as possible because we are also looking at the opportunity for pre-panelizing things. I'm sure you all for months and months drove by the Griffin being constructed at the south end of downtown Royal Oak, that you saw the amount of staging space that was required for the pre-panelized walls, which were then crane lifted, and they were putting up a floor and a half a day from a rough construction standpoint, because all of that stuff was already pre-built to, higher factory standards, a better control, integration of systems into it, numerous things. If we had an open city block next to us, that would be the best way to build it. But there is a just-in-time delivery opportunity for that too. So, but for the hardest stages, which are ripping up the ground, getting the foundations in place, and getting that primary steel frame in place, where the site is pretty much a wreck until that gets happening, we understand that we will have to be using our ground floor plate as part of our staging opportunity for what happens up above. So there is a period of early construction that's the worst period because it's the most upsetting to the site itself. From that point on, there are means by which you can mitigate it. But I shouldn't have even said that.
Thank you.
And since you can't speak on means and methods, can we write those in the conditions for approval? I know that we can't, because, I mean, if it tears up the brick pavers or something, the brick pavers will need to get replaced at some, and we need to, as a city, document the condition of it right now before construction starts to make sure that it was not damaged during construction.
So I think that would be up to the engineering department, and they've, and the city, which have approved, or reviewed the plans, and I believe that they would work towards, I'm assuming that they would work towards, working off Troy, versus Allen, or.
On
Allen.
projects
Allen
of-
versus Troy.
Yep, that's the one.
Through the chair, isn't that part of the bonding? I mean, when a project gets started?
I'm not sure if it's part of the bonding, but it's typically part of the pre-construction coordination on a project of this scale in the heart of a downtown. I've gone through it in Rochester Hills, and I'm going through it in Hazel Park right now. So there's typically, through the permitting process and prior to start of construction, there's typically an internal pre-construction meeting. There's permits to be had for easements and right-of-ways. So that's typically handled from the building and, as was mentioned, the engineering department. And I do sit in on those meetings. Very exciting meetings.
How is the building being cooled?
Air conditioning.
VRF?
So we've actually, we entertain the three different systems that are available in most multifamily homes. The specific type of a project that we're delivering, we've actually provided chefs through the building, both for the public spaces and the interior. We're actually considering rooftop units on this to keep all servicing out of the inside of the units and to just feed things most conveniently.
Okay, so rooftop units then? Okay.
For the most part, yes. Small water heater suspended in spaces. These are generous units too. 10-foot ceiling heights on the first 3 floors, 9-foot ceiling heights for the 4th and 5th floor.
Yeah, because I know sometimes mechanical units can get pretty big, and I mean, and I know in your elevations, it's not they can sometimes be a giant
Oh, yeah.
unit on the top of the building.
Well, we discovered numerous things. The biggest pieces of equipment are associated with the restaurant use, and the biggest happens to be both the provision of rooftop air conditioning, heat, supply and return units, as well as the makeup air units. We have entertained the opportunity to be able to continue to utilize some of the existing Rosie's rooftop space for some of the bigger pieces to keep that off of the highest portion of the roof.
That would be to the south of the
That
container
would be
pool
to
on
the
the east
east.
side.
It would be to the south of the screen wall component that we discussed. That was the back of the pool deck area.
Thank you, understood.
Through the chair, those will be screened?
The screening right now is being proposed by a 6-foot-high AZAC fence that's on top of a 4-foot elevated deck over the existing rooftop of the Rosie's building.
Yes, but I meant the rooftop mechanicals.
Yes.
It'll be screened from the south.
So all the rooftop mechanicals associated with the actual 5th floor construction is behind a 5-foot masonry and aluminum forms and surfaces.
Okay.
Parapet wall. As I had mentioned earlier, a majority of the equipment is being held to the front or the north end of the existing Rosie's roof, which is absolutely screened from 9 Mile Road.
Yeah.
And as I had described while having the Troy Street elevation up, is that it's our belief that you can only see that from the dot because it's far enough back from our addition to the back of the existing Rosie's building. But should a screen wall be required there, I can add a screen wall. You could write that in as
I live behind the Credit Union 1 building, and when it was built, it wasn't required to have screening. And every summer, all day long, all you hear is the operation of their air conditioning.
It would be simple enough, and because again, always those types of things are always related to structurally. How do you accomplish it structurally? As it turns out, we have an existing back wall to Rosie's, which is a masonry wall. We have the opportunity to do a very simple screen wall on it.
That's great, thank you.
Through the chair, are we still on the topic of screen walls, or do you want to change topic? Okay. One of the questions I have referring to the bike parking is we were discussing the amount of spots that are required by code. And I believe 7 of the spots were existing city bike racks on the street. Is that correct? How we got to that number?
On 9 Mile, 7
Okay.
of those spots are on a bike rack on 9 Mile.
So does that then require a bike variance because they're in essence using a public entity, kind of similar like parking? You know, they're getting the parking variance because they're not providing on site. Same with the bike parking, it's not being provided on site. They're just pointing to a bike rack close by to get the required number. So technically, wouldn't that be a bike parking variance as well that they would be requesting in this case?
Well, can you answer that?
Requesting a variance or a waiver?
Well, so pretty much saying you're not providing the required parking, bike parking on site that you're supposed to be providing. So you can't count a city bike parking rack as part of their required bike parking is what I'm saying. Similar to like they're not providing the car parking, so they have to get a waiver for that. Is that not the same thing for the bike parking?
Well, through the chair, I mean, we have the waivers under very specific portions of the ordinance, and it tells you exactly what you can do a waiver. So for the parking ordinance, it spells it out very clearly, and it says why and under what conditions you can permit that. I don't believe we have that for the bicycle parking, unfortunately.
So I would actually say that Article 24-223 is our off-street parking requirements. So the off-street parking requirements and the number, units and methods of measurement are subsection C. The parking requirements or the bicycle parking facilities rather, are subsection E. The waiver requirements or reduction of parking requirements are subsection G and relate to the overall parking requirements of which the bicycle parking are a part of. So I do believe that the Planning Commission may reduce the parking requirements, including the bicycle parking requirements, based upon finding that there will be a lower demand for parking due to one or more of the following factors. 1, the shared parking by multiple uses with peak parking demands during differing times of the day or days of the week. I'll note 742 Palco left. Two, convenient municipal off-street parking or on-street parking spaces are located within 500 feet. That must have changed since last year when we said 1,000, or wrote it in our motion. Three, that the expectation of walk-in business due to sidewalk connections to adjacent residential neighborhoods or employment centers. The site design incorporates pedestrian connections to the site and on-site pedestrian circulation, providing safe and convenient access to the building entrance. That's a mouthful, sorry. Availability of other forms of travel, such as transit. This includes that the planning commission may require that the site design incorporate transit stops, pedestrian connections to nearby transit stops or enhanced bicycle parking facilities. And 5, that the applicant provide a parking study, et cetera. So that, I believe, does reference the bicycle parking requirements as well.
So they would require.
So I believe that we should just add that to the overall parking waiver for the site, if we were to, yes, go that route.
Okay, because along that term, like that front bike rack, I'm having the most problems with, because with the seasonal patio that's quite large on the front, what that does to the walkability, if you in essence had bikes actually parked there, is it no longer makes that sidewalk there ADA accessible. Because the patio sticks out, the bikes would then park out towards 9 Mile, and with where the bike rack is, that's more narrow than 5 feet. And with the straight line of the patio and the adjoining planter box at the property next door, for the flow of the sidewalk, it also cuts it up as well. So I'm having a little bit of issue with that area when it comes to accessibility and flow of the property on that proposed seasonal patio.
Yeah, through the chair, if I could just add for that, for the seasonal patios, that's a little bit separate. Those get applied for. They have their own permitting, their own process and review. So these are the kind of things that we do look at when we review the permits for those. I know we did it recently on a different site, but we do verify that there is ADA accessibility, and it does get checked out by our engineers when they go through that permitting process.
I think, I mean, I'm not going to speak definitely here, but I think ADA sidewalk length width is 6 feet, or 3 feet as well. I think that's the minimum, and then, but if you have less than 5 feet, you have to have passing lanes every so often, so I think it's actually 3 feet is the ADA.
Okay. I mean, I know in our industry standard it's 5 feet, because it's especially too, and then we're talking about you having bikes on the sidewalks, you're having strollers, you're having all this other accessibility. You're now creating a bottleneck right in that area. But yeah, I know engineering looks at that. I hope they look very closely at this particular spot, because I think it would be problematic with the way it's drafted up right now. Oh, and then on the topic of parking, since we previously, when we received this project, we obviously had a discussion where we determined a parking pass per bedroom. There was some reason behind that, why we had done that.
Potentially. So I'll just let you know that Roger and Kyle were doing some sleuthing during the meeting, trying to review the meeting production video,
Okay.
whatever it's called, during using closed captioning to see if they could dial into that conversation, and that they think that it potentially was a clerical error in the minutes, and that it was potentially, and without actually listening to it, I'm not sure if we want to
So
make
it
that
was really only
definitive,
23.
but it potentially was the 23.
Okay, so now we're talking about a variance difference of 23 to 36. 36, okay. Okay, well, then that nullifies my next comment, so, okay.
Okay, and then just to clarify, do you suggest that they move the bike rack, or one of the bike racks?
Well, yeah, the bike rack on 9 Mile is definitely going to be problematic when it comes to that patio space. And so, yeah, I mean, removing that, and actually probably the street trash can adjoining property will have to move, but that's not a big deal. But that particular bike rack will probably, in my opinion, probably need to be removed if that seasonal patio comes out. And then that makes it so they're void of 7 parking spaces technically.
Could I ask a question of our city staff about patio permitting. So when people in the DDA apply for their patio permits, they are being measured from other fixtures nearby. So actually, I'm thinking kind of the opposite, Dustin, which is that make the bike parking the fixture that doesn't move, which means if anything, the seasonal patio has to scooch back a little bit when it goes through.
Closer to the building.
When it goes through its permitting.
Agreed.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the permitting being through the DDA, unrelated to the site plan.
It's through the city, but yes, it is unrelated to the site plan. It's an annual process, I believe.
But that would be a potential issue if you're planning on, having that patio space and then it wasn't to be approved because of the accessibility issues, so.
Yeah.
I think that,
It might just change in dimension.
Right.
right, but, seating capacity.
Yeah, and frankly, through the chair, we had a situation recently where we thought, at a glance, there was a passageway and it was under 5 feet, and we were looking at options. But our city engineers came back very quickly, and they did look at I think it is 3 feet is the minimum. And what they really are concerned about are passing lanes. So if it's just a sign that encumbers you for a little bit, as long as, there's room for other people to get around, as long as you're not in a narrow corridor of like 500 feet, I think that's really the bigger concerns when it comes to sidewalk accessibility and for ADA requirements. So I do, I completely.
Where was that space at, if you know?
It was another restaurant on 9 Mile. I don't know exactly. The other, yeah. Yes, it was Tiger Lily, actually.
Oh, okay.
So that was a space where the city engineer said it was completely ADA accessible. It's a little bit tight, of course, but because you do have that, you're not restricted to, a tunnel, essentially. You do have maneuverability once you get past the obstruction. And that was really the heart of the matter for the ADA approval.
Okay.
But like I said, clearly this did go through a lot of review very quickly at City Hall.
And are you relying on the seasonal patio as a means of egress out of the building as well? As part of your 2 required exits?
No, it's not part of the, it's not part of the required exiting, but it can be utilized as an exit. It's just not a barrier-free exit at that point.
So I see the one exit from the restroom to the right. I see the one exit out of there, but the other one looks like you're egressing through a kitchen, which I don't know.
The main entrance is the northwest corner of the project is a primary entrance and exit point, and then being able to access through between the bathrooms and then down through the via exit out to Troy Street is the second legal exit. It meets all the common path travel distances and overall travel distance for egress. And it's a fully sprinkled building on top of that.
Commissioner Hadford's brought up the difference in the 23 to 36. How is everyone feeling about the increase in units, the increase in the parking waiver? We do have our waiver capacity. I just read the 5 factors that are to be considered when we do a reduction of the parking requirements. Just noting that there's also another option that there is the payment in lieu of parking in the CBD. So within the CBD, in lieu of physically providing some or all of the off-street parking spaces required in the subsection, the city council may permit an applicant pay a one-time fee to the city in lieu. It does say that city council would take this up. So if we weren't comfortable with just waiving the full 36 spaces, there is another option for the reduction of the pay in lieu. This is a reminder to the commission.
Through the chair, I'm not clear in remembering whether or not that is still something that we do now that the dot is built. And I'm also not clear on when it talks about a one-time payment. I'm pretty sure that the applicant, when he did the original expansion and updated Rosie's, made some payments around, there was a tree removal at that time, the ordinance is a little different now, and I thought there was some parking payment. So that, I was wondering if we should talk about payment in lieu of parking, but I don't have some of the historical context. I feel like I can have a thoughtful conversation about it, particularly since it sounds like ideally the residents and other users of this development will be paying to park in the city's municipal parking system.
Through the chair, I'm trying to think of when this happened. I think this happened in 2020, just after the dot opened. The DDA came to council and requested that we waive or remove the payment in lieu of parking policy.
But I can't remember.
For the, I believe specifically, there was, so we have the pay in lieu of parking, I think that was required for an expansion of somebody that had a liquor license? Was it very specifically tied to that,
Yes,
or no?
but that was that only applied to facilities that had liquor license. We didn't have payment in lieu of parking for anything else. Not that I'm aware of.
I think it was a requirement. I think we still, I mean, so we still do have the pay in lieu in the zoning ordinance as an option. But I think at one point it was required for certain businesses, and that's, I don't know if Kyle has the more specifics, but.
Yeah, well, and to me, this is an expansion. I mean, the restaurant is expanding to a larger footprint. You're actually creating two new entities. So I think had we been here 2 years ago, payment in lieu would have been applied. I don't think we have payment in lieu for we do have because that's what Ferndale House had to do.
Exactly, section 24-223.
Yeah, through the chair, I think we do have payment in lieu as an option, but at one point for alcohol-related businesses, I think there was a window of a couple of years where if you were an alcohol-related business and you went into the CBD and there wasn't sufficient parking, then you had to do it.
It was during a time where there was a lot of retail storefronts being taken over by restaurant storefronts, and that was one of the ways of trying to limit that by saying you have to pay into the payment in lieu because you're ultimately adding more of a parking stress at the same time.
Which really brought us Urban Rest and Liver Noise, why can't I?
Exactly, yeah, it pushed stuff out of the
It
central.
pushed, yes, out of the city central, yeah.
I mean, oh, sorry, go ahead, please.
No, I was just going back to her original question, which is how we were feeling on a park.
Oh,
Well, so like
you're okay with the waive of
The
36?
the payment in lieu,
Not a requirement.
if that is something that the city council can discuss, I think the payment in lieu is something that should be looked into, given the fact that, yes, the dot was built, but now that the dot is no longer covered by the parking fund and it has tapped into the general fund, it's now a public subsidized entity, and I think that for the public, it should be looked into as somehow trying to refund, like pay back the public for the money that overran. So for this kind of a project that benefits from that, I think there should be some kind of a discussion on saying, you know, how can we pay back the public so that way the public isn't the one covering the cost of future developments downtown, if that makes sense.
Something that we should look into.
I think
changing
something,
the
yeah,
ordinance.
a payment in lieu, I think makes sense for this kind of a project, especially now that the general fund was tapped for the dot to pay it off because of cost overrun.
And for potential future.
Parking
also
facilities,
developments.
yeah, too.
Thank you. Anything else?
And so, I know that we were also discussing parking and payment in lieu. Just to take us one step back, is everyone also okay with having all of this density being pushed into the dot and essentially permanently taking away 32 spaces away from the dot? Or am I?
Through the chair, it's not permanently. It is as available, and I added that language from the
Okay.
old motion into this one. So no, I'm not okay with it permanently.
Okay.
But
And I would like to say that it's not the dot specifically, it's most likely the dot, but it is, we are not designated dot spaces. I mean, that will be a conversation with the public, city, and as available, but
Okay.
I just want to make sure
So
we don't tie that language specifically to
So
it.
we're waiving the parking, and it's up to the applicant to work out with the city where that overflow parking is.
Yeah.
We're not stipulating that that parking is going into the dot.
Thank you, good point, yes.
And through the chair, Dustin, Commissioner Hackforth, I appreciate your view on the payment in lieu of parking, and I thought about that as well. But that can be very expensive for a developer. In my mind, we did create the DOT for a purpose of serving the downtown businesses and residents for additional parking. And in my thought is, if we're going to force payment in lieu, then we should consider that an automatic space. So if they're going to pay for a space, then they should get a space that would be dedicated to that building. You know, you're looking at tens of thousands of dollars that someone's going to be investing.
Yeah, I think my argument back to that, though, is there's tens of thousands of dollars that the taxpayers ended up investing in that we weren't expecting to. And again, it benefits downtown businesses and property owners, but why should someone who lives on the other side of the tracks along Hilton have to pay for that parking space?
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Is what you're proposing apply to this project, or are you just presenting this as a topic to discuss in the future?
I think it's to this project and to a topic to discuss in the future. And I don't think it's every single project that comes up, but when we're talking about a large amount of a parking variance, I think that's why it comes up for this conversation. If you have like a bar or restaurant that can't provide the 2 parking spaces, I think that's a different conversation. But we're talking about a project of this caliber, of this kind of cost point, I feel like that's where this discussion would come up, not the mom and pop shop opening up that can't provide the 1 parking.
I mean, the counter to that is that private investment wouldn't occur without the city making the investment in the DOT, right? Like a developer wouldn't take on the typical cost of creating parking on most any site in downtown Ferndale. And so the increased tax base that's going to occur because development can now occur without the burden of developing parking is going to naturally feed in. Not to mention that I think it was in the notes from the last time this project was in front of us that the developer was going to be incurring the cost of the parking passes for his tenants. So he is going to be paying towards parking, right? Which I would imagine is part of a broader business plan for the DOT, that it's not only going to pay for itself, but then pay for future parking across the city. So those are just my thoughts there.
Good thoughts, yeah.
I think the point is parking is expensive.
Yep.
It's always a problem. Sorry, go ahead.
Question, and it might, tell me if it's oranges instead of apples. Troy Street residents, housing residents have permitted parking. What is the requirement, or would the residents in this building say, I live on this street near this area? Do they have the opportunity, or do we want them to park on Troy or in the area with the permit parking, or is this muddying the waters in 2 separate things?
I think that we should probably keep it at, if we provide a parking waiver, the applicant will have to work with the city for public parking spaces to park their residents. It is on the applicant that they are providing residences without parking, that they're likely going to have to market those in a certain way that will provide them parking. They'll have to work with the city to find those, and that it wouldn't be our purview where those would be if we provide the waiver. I think that it is kind of an important question, though, in the respect that we might want to know if we're making that waiver decision. But I think that would be a conversation with the city that I'm not sure if we're prepared to answer, if the RPZ would allow.
Through the chair. So the RPZ, in this instance for West Troy, is from Allen to Farmdale. I don't believe it goes all the way to Livernois. I think it's just to Farmdale. So any resident that lives in that block can participate in it. So this project is outside the RPZ, so they couldn't apply for a permit to park on that block.
So it would be municipal parking lots.
Yeah, or street parking
Good
that's on, Troy. Metered parking.
Could I contribute to this by refreshing some people's memories from a year ago, which is an important component of this? Part of the original work that we've done, that we did when Justin was still here and we were dealing with him, was in fact that the existing Rosie's property had a designated occupancy of over 350 people. And with our new project, when you look at our total occupancy of the proposed restaurant and the residences up above, and that would be a misspeak. As of the project that we presented a year ago, when it was just the additional floor with the 10 units and the 2 bedrooms each per, we were 75 spaces lower than, or 75 occupants lower in that overall piece of property than what it's currently approved for. So now in this case, I guess there's a slight reckoning to be made because we've added the floors. And also to point out that this is one of those chicken and egg or catch-22 situations, because it was the original intention of building the greatest restaurant in the world on that corner, and unfortunately we couldn't expand that without adding the second floor, which then propagated this entire process, which we added the second floor, found that we can't add a second floor, we have to add a few floors to make this right. So we find ourselves round robin, and I believe if nothing else, we can work with Kyle to reconcile what that reduced occupant load is, so that at least we're all talking about the same thing. And to the person that made the point, absolutely part of our marketing strategy is, and it's incorporated into the fee for the unit, we buy you a parking space in the dot, and so you are paying for that parking space in the dot. So thank you for having made that point, and I'm sorry I was so confused at the time, I didn't know who made it, but
No,
we
thank
are
you for the
actually paying
reminder,
into
Roman.
that system and paying for those spaces. So to your point, sir, specifically, it might have been forgotten that we were dealing with a rather significant reduction of overall occupancy of this project, because that patio is occupied at a very high rate, and we've got the occupancy numbers that were agreed to with Justin before. So we'll just dig that stuff out again, get it in Kyle's hands, but you'll see that, in fact, we're dealing with still a diminished occupancy from what we had before.
Thank you for the reminder.
Through the chair, I can make a parking reduction motion if you want to open discussion on the motion, or?
Just one more quick reminder, I want to decouple dot with parking, because I don't want to, okay. All right, thank you.
Through the chair, are we ready for a motion, or would you mind to continue
I
discussion?
think we're, if you're ready, we're ready.
It just seems like we're talking about this topic, so we might as well make a motion and discuss it.
Correct.
That's what I was thinking. Okay. I would move in the matter of 279 West 9 Mile that the Planning Commission approve the parking reduction request for 36 off-street parking spaces, as well as 7 bike parking spaces, based on civil plans dated May 12th, 2022, and floor plans and elevations dated June 27th, 2022, and with the following findings. Finding number 1 is unchanged. Finding number 2 will read, availability of nearby on-street parking and bike racks. Finding number 3 will read, availability of nearby off-street municipal parking within 500 feet. Finding number 4 is unchanged. Finding number 5 is unchanged. New finding number 6, to state that the applicant will work with the city to provide off-street parking through the municipal parking system as available.
That is a motion by Commissioner Baker. Do I have a second?
Second.
A second by Commissioner Husky. Thank you. Any discussion on the motion?
Through the chair, actually, there is one other item that I wanted to bring up, and it may be a nothing. But I did notice that there's 4 trees that are currently on the site that are obviously going to be removed. But there's nothing in the documentation that says the existing trees are being removed.
Do you want to handle that on the site plan, after the parking motion?
I sure can.
Okay. Let's keep it simple for now.
That's fine.
Well, we will return to that. That's a good call. Any,
I'll comment that in reviewing the payment in lieu of parking in section 224-223K, City Council sets the fees. A lot of this is functionally a control of City Council, but one of the things that that I'm looking at is in section K, number 2, taking into account the current inventory of public parking. Our current inventory of public parking, we have a plan that's coming to us at a point at which there's a lot of uncertainty around what else is being developed around the dot in particular. So when it comes to a current inventory of public parking, in my opinion, and I'm not the parking department, but we have the capacity to service us. So that is why I did not propose that there be any type of payment in lieu of parking. There are no parking spaces being removed. Years ago, the first time that the big renovation was done, there were some spaces removed, and I believe there was a payment related to that. So this is a change in use. We've talked about the change in overall capacity of the different spaces. There's certainly a difference in time of day fluctuation. If these aren't late night, bars like Rosie's was, you're going to have less overlap with the overnight parking that residential requires. So in terms of my motion, looking at the current inventory of public parking, I don't feel that there needs to be any type of cash payment proposed into our municipal parking system. But I also did make sure that there was a finding to make it clear that there's no guarantee that these spaces will always be provided by the municipal parking system.
Through the chair, obviously, we found out that we're not the body to determine payment in lieu. That's a city council related issue. So can we add the stipulation to have city council look into this project and determine on their accordance if a payment in lieu would be necessary or not, and leave it up to them, but put that in a stipulation to ensure that they look into that and address that when it comes time to approve or deny this project?
My suggestion was going to be to not tie it to this specific project, but that to, in our commission items, to request the city to bring it back to a parking study, potentially through the master plan process, which is currently opened, and then to provide us in council with a presentation on how they feel in terms of municipal financing, future development for parking facilities, and proposed projects that are in queue, what type of adjustments we might need to the zoning ordinance. I think that since it is a zoning ordinance amendment, we will certainly need to remain involved. But that also certainly now is a good time with the master plan open for edits and for review at commission. That might be something that we incorporate into a presentation to the city council.
Like sooner rather than later?
I guess my only concern about doing that is I feel like we're in the same situation that we were with affordable housing, is that we had 2 large projects go through and then we address the issue. And same with here, it's like we won't have a big project go through, not do anything, and then all of a sudden say, oh yeah, we should start doing payment in lieu. And it doesn't have as much relevance anymore because these kind of projects don't come around very often or not very quickly.
So your suggestion would be to request that this site plan go before the city council prior to them being able to move forward? Or is that what you're suggesting?
Well, because the city council still has to vote on it, is that correct or no? Oh, they don't?
No, it's by right.
Okay.
Am I right? Yeah, that's where I was getting confused.
Yeah, okay, well, and that's
Oh, where that might
that's my
happen.
fault.
Yep,
That's
yep.
why I thought it was going, because when we were discussing the payment thing.
If we requested that they do pay in lieu, then it would have to go to city council.
That's supposed to say council.
Okay.
Through the chair. And Commissioner Hagford, I'm torn, because on one side, I completely understand where you're coming from. And on the other side, for so many years, people said, we have a parking problem, we have a parking problem, we have a parking problem. We're not getting the development that we want, we have a parking problem. And so we tried to solve that problem, we built it, and they came, and now we want to say, okay, now that we built it and you're here, now we want you to pay.
I think where my feeling about that, because I totally agree with you, and I agree where Commissioner Hosky was coming from on you need to build that kind of infrastructure to bring development. I think where my feeling changes is how it's funded. Is again, when we have parking problem, we have a parking problem. When it came up to the funding, it was like, we have parking funds, we can cover it, we're good. Then fast forward, now it's, we don't have parking funds, so now we're going to use general fund to cover it.
Well,
Go cover the
temporarily. I would argue that that's temporarily, and it was because of the pandemic where we lost all of this parking that we had to temporarily dip into the general fund in order to support the payments we needed to make. But the city has every intention of paying that money back out of the parking fund as we move forward, because parking is now, come back, there's a lot more parking that's happening, so the funds are coming back now that the pandemic is quote-unquote over. So the city is being paid back, the general fund is being paid back. So it was more of a, we borrowed it, and then the city, or the residents had to pay for it.
And I would add, looking at the chair and looking at section K, I'm sorry, section 24223K, what I don't read in here, and I'm looking at K2, is the ability for a payment in lieu fee to be assessed because of how parking development has been financed. So the way I'm reading it, it's about current inventory of public parking and future needs of CBD parking, which I think Michelle kind of talked about in that like higher level. The size of the contribution, like if you're talking about a very small contribution, is it impactful, right? I think that's what this speaks to. The benefit to the public and to the private owners from such parking, which would subsequently be provided by the city, which is kind of what Greg just talked about. There is a benefit to providing a public amenity, and it accrues to both public and private owners. I get your policy point. I'm just not sure how to frame it within a zoning ordinance discussion appropriately.
As it stands today, I think there's room to have that discussion for future projects, but what we have today, I don't think lends itself to that. I think all of your points are warranted and prompts a larger discussion on how we approach parking downtown and for future development. But I think that understanding the years that go into putting a deal together and to, I want to be as reliable as possible for the development community. I think conversations like this in response to a project as opposed to data and planning and thoughtfulness that is rolled out with adequate feedback from the community and notice to the development community, I think is just, it can be unfair.
Yeah. Well, I agree with that. I mean, where my concern instantly comes from is, I do see the dot capacity has definitely gone up. And now we're starting to get tenants in the main level, and the tenants are a variety of uses and a variety of times. So now we haven't yet to see fully what their parking is going to be. And then we have residential that's connected to the dot that again was planned on that would be the parking. So that's a usage that we have yet to see. And that residential changed even from when it was proposed as well. Initially it was proposed as being micro units, people that wouldn't have cars anyways. Now it's being promoted as a different kind of housing, at least the last iteration that we saw of it was a different type of iteration. So that's a parking use. And then we still don't know what's going on top. So my concern is that there's so much already that's been kind of promised for that capacity usage. And then now we're adding this, which before when we heard the project, we had the parking concerns. We understood them. We get that it's a tight lot and we understood that. Now we're ramping up even more, even though the capacity of the restaurant's different. These are also a different way of using the parking spots. Those could be people that work from home and leave their car there all day long. And then you have, still a vibrant restaurant that's going to be a destination. You're going to have more people coming in and using it. So that's where my concern is. I just don't want to overpromise. And yes, right at this very moment, the capacity today may not be that big, but there's a lot of projects going on around there that have already planned in that capacity that I'm worried we're overselling it. And then we're going to be back to, we need parking, and then what are we going to do now?
Any further discussion on the motion? You ready for a vote? Go ahead. Yep.
Is it on? Can you hear it?
Yep.
All right, there we go. I can go up there. You want to go up there? I'm going to go up there, just to make sure it catches me. So lots of great conversation, but I'll just elaborate on a couple things. Joe and I had a conversation this afternoon about parking. So in terms of the DOT, it's not just a parking garage, it's a mixed-use parking garage that has associated retail, office, and affordable housing with it. So my understanding, and Councilor Pollica can jump in, but I believe floors 3 and 4 were under taxable bonds, and the underground and first floor were, or second floor, whatever it might be, were non-taxable. And so there's different ways it has to be addressed. For lots 3 and 4, it is likely with the opening of Ascension Health and the salon and the chocolate place and the future residential and office, that lots 3 and 4 will fill up with those users. So it's going to take those offline. For lots 1 and 2, because they were non-taxable bonds.
You're saying lots in terms of floors, right?
Sorry, floors. And floors, we'll call it 1 and 2. Those were non-taxable bonds, and since you use non-taxable bonds for the IRS, it has to be open to the public. So those can be opened up to anybody, but it has to be a first come, first serve. So, pretending numbers, if a percentage of permits are already issued for the DOT and development happens and floors 3 and 4 push those people down, there's going to be a limited number of parking permits for anybody else, 215, employees of this new restaurant, the residential, et cetera. So I think that's why we're being cautious, saying right now, you can probably have all the permits you want for the residential, but it's probably not going to last very long, and I don't know how many you'll have. I think, to me, it looks like the minutes were transposed, that Planning Commission probably did approve a parking waiver. I see in this closed caption 23 or 24 units. It does add up to 23. So when you look at the existing Rosie O'Grady's is exempt. The new restaurant at that time added, I think, 8 spaces. The new office added 5. The new residential added 10. You get to 23. But I see 24 being captioned. So I think it's hard to go back, even though this is a different proposal, from the 23 or 24 that was previously granted, because we granted that. But I can't answer that unless I watch the video, and we'd have to recess. So at that point, what do we do with these extra spaces? I think the money is valuable for cash in lieu. The cash in lieu number is much smaller than purchasing a parking garage space. When you're looking at a parking garage space, $35,000, $40,000, $45,000. Our parking lieu is, I think, $5,000 for the first 10, $1,000 for every one thereafter. I think Planning Commission, you have a couple choices, which Brian will not want to do one of them, and I understand why. But the first, if you grant all 36, there's no bite at the apple. So we can't grant 36 and then go talk to City Council, because once you grant that waiver, it is over with. You could probably fashion a condition that says the Planning Commission approves a waiver of 2324 and recommends the applicant pay cash in lieu. If the council does not accept that, then the Planning Commission grants a waiver of 36. That's a little iffy, but you could. And the third option, which I don't recommend, but I'm going to say it out loud, is to table it, go to council, have them figure out if they want to accept cash in lieu and come back, which he doesn't want to do and we don't want to do. So with that said, there's a couple options. Is just to grant the waiver of 36, understanding that it is the landlord's responsibility to find parking. Grant a partial waiver, I think you can do with cash in lieu, but it's up to Planning Commission how to proceed. But I wanted to lay that all out there for the DOT numbers and this.
Thank you, Roger.
Through the chair. And just, Roger, for clarity, you said that we're limited on the numbers, but it is a first comes, first serve. So today, we have enough to provide parking passes for this project, the 36 that would be needed. A year from now, another project may come through, and they may want 10 or 12, and they might not be there.
I wish I could say, because currently I don't know how many parking passes are sold. It appears when you visit there that there's enough room for additional people, but maybe there's already been 100 sold. My concern is if they purchase 25, 30, 35, it probably can be accommodated with separate hours. But again, when everything goes vertical, 3 and 4 floors 3 and 4 will not be able to, generally speaking, unless we figure out how to coordinate it, will be for all the other users, which means any parking passes that are allowed for people that you see on any floor are going to be pushed down to 1 and 2 only. And so if those exceed the number of spaces, then there would be none available, if that makes sense. It's kind of this hard thing. Now, there's another way to do it, I think, is first come, first serve. There's already people who own 30 or 40 permits. So do they get the first dibs? Or is every year a lottery where everybody puts their name in and it's a first come, first serve yearly? It becomes much harder to do. I don't have the answers.
Well, it's technically now it's a lottery because we're not selling specific passes to the dot, are we? My understanding is you buy a parking pass for long-term parking and you can park anywhere in the city in a long-term space. So I could park at Withington, I could park at City Hall, I could park at the dot. So we're not dedicating a parking pass specifically for the dot. So we could have 150, I know we have much more than that because people complain all the time about Withington, that they buy parking passes to be able to park in Withington long-term, and they're always used up.
So per the city's website, you have a variety of options to purchase. You could buy a monthly permit traditional, which is all yellow street level, or you can buy a monthly permit, which is the dot plus traditional. It does not appear to me, based on the website, there's a dot only. There's traditional
Yes.
or dot plus traditional.
Yeah.
You're right, it's a lottery at this point, but I think given COVID, given there's no businesses, it's a pretty, everybody wins the lottery every day at the dot. Once all the development happens and you take off floors 3 and 4 and you cram them down to 1 and 2, the lottery might change every day.
Yeah.
But I'd say those are the options. You can grant, it's planning commission's choice, grant 36, knowing 23 were done before, and you're fine with that. Grant a partial with a cash in lieu. I think those are the choices that are reasonable.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Kyle, can I have a roll call vote, please?
Just for clarity, we are voting on a waiver of all 36 parking spaces.
Plus 7 bike spaces,
Plus-
because they're in the
yes.
public realm.
Thank you.
With the additional finding that it's based on availability. Applicant will work with city to provide off-street parking through municipal parking system as available.
Yes.
Any further questions or discussion? All right, can I have that roll call vote, please?
Hagfors,
No.
Azar,
Yes.
Hosku,
Yes.
Baker,
Yes.
Foster,
Yes.
Showalter,
Yes.
Akers,
Yes.
Brazen,
Yes.
and Polika.
Yes. Through the chair.
Motion passes, yes.
I think typically the chair votes last. Is that not correct?
Yeah, we can discuss it later.
Okay.
Thank you. Not a big deal. Excuse me. Okay, so I think that we can start maybe, before we do a motion, maybe a question for the applicant on the 4 trees that are currently on the site and were not shown on the site plan? Or is it on the engineering plan?
It's a variance for 8.
So it might be
They're ornamental
regular.
trees.
Yeah.
There's a couple that are on the patio and then one that's on Troy Street right at the south.
At a planter that's on a screen wall that's part of going away. So yes, the intention, sorry for that miss, but the intention is the 4 trees go away. Same as it was when we were in front of this board back a year ago.
Yep.
All right.
I had a question to Councilmember Polika. So are you thinking that in this motion, finding number 5 talks about payment in lieu for the required trees, the 8 trees that are required? Are you wanting to that also reflect the 4 trees that are being removed and any payment that needs to be made for those?
No, I'm not recommending that because if there was a different plan on the site, those trees remained, all that would be required would be 4 more trees.
Okay, so 8 is,
I'm fine with
Right
the
number.
8. I just wanted it on the record that
Okay.
4 trees are being removed in case someone comes back and says, why are you removing those trees? You know?
okay. I want to make sure I understood the bottom line.
Yep.
Thank you.
I would be happy to
just for the
start a
record.
motion. I'd be happy to start a motion. There might be some other conditions that I've missed, but I think I've got the one about the screening wall that Councilmember was asking about. You want me to?
Go ahead. I don't recall any others.
I would move in the matter of 279 West 9 Mile. The Planning Commission approved the site plan based on civil plans dated May 12th, 2022, and floor plans and elevations dated June 7th, 2022, with the following findings and subject to the following conditions. Findings 1 through 6 as stated. I'm sorry. Findings 1 through 3 as stated. Finding number 4 will be updated to reflect that the Planning Commission approved the parking waiver of 36 off-street parking spaces as well as 7 bike parking spaces to match the parking reduction approval motion. Findings 5 and 6 would be unchanged. Conditions 1 through 3 are unchanged. New condition 4 is that screening will be added on the south or Troy Street side of the roof. Well, I guess mechanical screening will be added on the south or Troy Street side of the roof. That was something that came up and in discussion. If other people don't feel that it needs to be added, we can strike that, but I will add that condition for our discussion.
Thank you. That is a motion by Baker. Do I have a second?
Second.
And by Vice Chair Showalter. Do you have any comments or discussion on the motion?
My broad comment on the site plan is that I think it clearly so much thought has gone into this design and how it interacts with the buildings around it, and I think it really shows the expertise that the applicant has in this very specific site, right? So Brian's been operating here for a long time. He knows the dynamics of the space, and I think it really shows in this design and how it interacts with neighboring buildings, how it interacts with neighbors to the south and potential development to the south, as well as how it functions internally. It just seems like this is, all of the knowledge, in the last decades in Ferndale are now compiled into this site. I think it's really impressive.
And as someone who typically harps on building materials,
They're gorgeous.
I think that it's a good use of building materials. I think that the colors, the adjacency of materials and the form, I think that it looks like a big improvement over what's there currently. And thank you for taking down the ephes.
Through the chair. I'll be honest, I really like the design of the first one. I thought it was very unique. I do like the fact on this one that you're not building right up to the apartment building with those balconies that would be facing the windows. I just thought that was really tight. So I do like that open effect. I do like the fact that you're now separating the looks of the two buildings, so it doesn't look like it's one big project. It looks like it's two different entities. So I think it's a welcome to the neighborhood. I think it's going to look very, very nice.
Thank you. Yes, it's a beautiful project, lots of amenities, and some housing that we desperately need in Ferndale. So thank you for bringing the project. Any further?
Oh, I guess my last question would be to our city staff. Is this project up for incentives or anything? We didn't talk about affordable housing, but I'm assuming that's because they're not going for brownfield or other incentives.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. I just know someone will ask me that question, so.
I know who.
I think Brian's saying he hasn't asked, but if he does, there is a code provision that 25% of units be affordable if that conversation comes up.
Got it, thank you.
Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Hagfors,
Yes.
Azar,
Yes.
Hosku,
Yes.
Baker,
Yes.
Showalter,
Yes.
Akers,
Yes.
Brazen,
Yes.
Polika,
Yes.
and Foster.
Yes, thank you. Motion passes. Thank you.
I'm just going to speak as a layman.
Brian's making statements, uh-oh.
I've been in this city 25, 30 years. In 2017, the city approached me about moving Rosie O'Grady's to the current site. It was part of your master plan to make that a patio. Again, the city approached me. I got a mortgage on my house, I got a mortgage on basically everything I had, credit cards. I did exactly what the city wanted, okay? Everybody knew it was a patio, there's clinging, there's clashing of dishes and whatever, and it has been a constant fight with my neighbors since I did it. I find myself now looking at this project, based on what you just voted with the parking, going deja vu. All I wanted to do was build on my patio. I already own the land, I paid $2 million to it to farm in, I've developed it, I got a special land use, it cost me $30,000, $40,000 attorney fees to get a special land use in 2018, okay? All I wanted to do was build on basically 3,500 square feet, okay? Reduce my parking requirement. Reduce my parking requirement. That's already built. Reduce my parking requirement, okay? Or my use for parking. And the city says, no, you can't enclose your patio unless you add a second story, okay? I say, okay, we put the second story on, I go meet with builders, I close Rosie's, let's go, 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 you can't get steel. Hey, Brian, because of the fenestration on Rosie's, it's gonna cost you $250,000 to rip off the front of the building, make the roof line go bigger, and you're basically gonna be shut down for 2 years to get this project done. And the reason I'm going deja vu is what I think you guys just passed based on availability. The whole point that city council got rid of the payment in lieu of. We have the dot now. Hey, Brian, you've suffered. You went through the pain. We took Troy Street. You had a right to do it, okay? We took your parking. You had a right to do it. I went through all the pain. I'm not even talking about COVID, okay? Now we have this structure. And this city says, hey, we're open for business. 2018, we're open for business. You can make it a patio. 2022, we're open for business. Expand your building. I'm still reducing my parking requirement. Keep Rosie's the way it is. Brian, don't change a thing. Change your DBA, okay? Make it what you want to be, and keep your seasonal patio. At some point, the planning commission, the city council, and the other city leaders have to pick a horse and tell the business owners and residents what you want to do. I'll go either way. I just wanted to build on 3,500 square feet. That's all I wanted to do. And the city said, no, you're required to put the second story on. Based on the cost of materials, I'm not kidding you, I got $200,000 into where we're at right now.
It's
Okay?
very difficult.
Hey, Brian, you can't make the number work building 3,500 square feet of apartments. Number doesn't work. You can't build over Rosie's without putting in all this steel, and basically it's cheaper to rip it down. So you meet with these builders, and they don't work for free, you pay them, and you come up with the best alternative to meet what the city asked for. They put up a sign and said, if you want to expand your building, we have parking, you got to put a second story on it.
Brian, your pain is definitely heard, and we really appreciate your feedback. I do just want to say that we definitely gave you the waiver. You do not have to provide, parking. I hope that everything goes very well with the parking permits with the city. That is a process that is with the city, and that we won't necessarily have control over in the future. But it is also the same waiver that we gave you last year. So we hope that it will do well, and we really appreciate this beautiful project that you brought us and your continued support of our community and all the business that you do.
And I appreciate that, but I think that city council and the planning and the city leaders
That is
have to
noted.
pick a direction and say, the dot's open, we're gonna let these developments in. If you wanna pay for future, pay for future. But, you know, would I invest $10 million if at any point you could take the dot away from me? No. I'm gonna go meet with, you know, whoever tomorrow, you know, city manager, Kyle. I gotta make sure that I got a place to park.
That is noted.
I can't
And we
just
will-
do this and hope a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 10 years, I can use the dot.
Right, and as you heard our conversation, we will, we are gonna direct the city staff and city council to review, parking in general, which is continually under a microscope. But then also, it was noted, that the master plan is open right now, that the draft has been presented. There will be, next month, a presentation to city council, of that draft. Is that correct? The date? Okay, so maybe September, is that what you're? Okay, anyways, there will be a presentation, and so within that would certainly be the opportunity to provide, direction in terms of the master planning, in terms of the parking, of downtown development, and so I would encourage you that the draft is already out for review, to review that, make sure that it is, if you have any comments on that, that is a perfect place to talk about the direction of development in the downtown.
Thank you.
Thank you, we appreciate the feedback. All right, with that, Roger or Kyle, do you have any administrative items? Thank you, Roman.
Yes, I do. The first is, as we just talked about and Roger mentioned, there's a slight change in the master plan or Plan Ferndale review schedule. Originally, it was out for a 42-day public review that has been extended to a 63-day public review. So it's just a 2-week shift for you all, but we will get it back as soon as we can. The other is July scheduling, which I think we did talk about briefly at our last meeting, but I just wanted to reconvene, kind of test the waters. Our next regularly scheduled meeting is the 20th, and then potentially, I guess we could use the 27th as a fallback. So we do have a upcoming site plan who would really like to get on July, and we're interested in moving it along. It has come along and it is nearing completion, so I'm anticipating we'll get revised plans that are going to be good to go in the near future.
And that would not have any, from previous discussions, would we have anyone recusing themselves from that specific site plan?
Not that I'm aware of. For Commissioner Hoskew, I will discuss that with the applicant. But other than that, I'm not aware of anything.
Just looking for a
So
show.
would we have a quorum for the 20th? Anyone who can't participate? I know Commissioner Hagforce cannot.
I won't be here on the 20th.
Commissioner Brazen will not be. Anyone else? 2 weeks from today?
I fly to Washington that following morning.
I think that we might even still have quorum without you, though. So it looks like we would have at least 6.
So that was only Hagfors and Brazen are definite no's, and probably no for Hoskew.
I'll do my very best to be
Okay.
there.
And while I'm here, I mean, the 27th,
Right.
are people here?
The
27th?
of
July?
What's the 27th?
3 weeks from today.
No, I meant.
As a backup
why-
date?
That's just a potential backup date. I'm just
Okay,
throwing
because
things
that's
out
the
there.
facilities task force meeting, which is held here from 5 to 7.
Okay.
And the 2 applications are coming. They aren't from certain groups that I might not be able to vote on. Is that correct?
So the one I'm talking about right now is 965 Wanda. So no, it is not Krieger Clad.
Okay, just want to make sure, because that's, do a lot.
Yes.
Anyone not available July 27th?
I'm not.
looks like we would have quorum if we had to. I think we would prefer the 20th as is regularly scheduled.
Understood.
Commission items, I have a couple.
Through the chair, do you want to go first, or do you want me to?
Go ahead.
Okay, so just to make it clear why I'm telling a lot of people that I won't be able to make the next couple of meetings, I am a little bit in a flux right now between jobs. I actually am transitioning to a new role, but it's up in Lansing. So I am trying to work out schedule-wise what I would be able to do. I will be working a hybrid schedule, so I'm only up there a couple days a week, but I have to make sure I can work out schedule that I'm able to make a planning commission meeting on Wednesday night. So that's the only reason why the next couple, I'm going to be a little out, on and off. And then obviously, you know, a month into it, I'll have a better sense of what my schedule is looking like and what my future at planning commission looks like as well.
Thank you. Anyone else have any commission items? Well, first of all, I just want to say, good job, team, on a holiday week. To have all 9 of us here on a summer day is very wonderful. So thank you all for your time this evening. Nice to see you back, Commissioner Hoskew. Then I don't think it necessarily needs to be reiterated. We had quite a bit of discussion about it, but the pay in lieu, if we can, you know, continue to work through that. I know that the city staff has a lot on their plate right now, but if we can incorporate that into the master plan presentation, if that might be the best route, just to bring it up. I know that it's not at all baked, but that we should, or at least, you know, work with the parking department and to perhaps bring us back something at a later date in terms of what the city, and then also make sure that city council is aware that we want to have the discussion at some point. And then I was going to ask, I know that there's been some staffing changes, but this kind of came up with the roll call and whatnot. Will we have somebody in the future at all to help us with like minutes and so from the clerk's office that we typically do have? So that Kyle doesn't have to wear multiple hats?
So right now they are going through the hiring process for a deputy. So I don't think the deputy was the person who's traditionally here. I think it was the elections manager. So that's another position that has not been filled, and I don't know what the status of that is. But I know the deputy, they're going through the interview process right now.
Actually, through the chair, I believe the deputy was. A lot of times we had Barb.
For years
we had, yeah. We had Jordan for a while. We rarely had Marnie.
Yeah, so Anthony's getting settled in with the elections, and then we did extend an offer to the deputy, and then the person selected another organization. So I think we've selected another person, and that person's starting soon. I think they're also looking for some part-time help in elections. So I think right now they are completely overwhelmed, so it may take a while.
Noted. I think that Kyle's doing a great job. I just wanted to check in with staffing.
Yeah, I would like to preferably get Christine here, but she has school on Wednesdays, so there might be a conversation coming where she could attend, but coming soon.
Okay, thank you.
Through the chair, currently our assistant to the city manager, Denicia, she is serving with, working with the city clerk, I believe, correct? You just had to nod your head.
Partly helping with a couple different things, yes.
And on elections, if anybody is interested in working the elections, they really, really need help for the August election. Everyone wants to focus on the November, but we need just as many people for the August, because it takes just as many people to run an election in August as it does in November.
Come work with me at the library. We have the most fun precinct.
I work absentee here.
Thank you for that request. I just had one more thing. I thought that Kelly Eckert, I'm just going to say Kelly because I might have wrote really poorly. Thank you. Yep. I couldn't read my own writing on her last name. I thought it was really wonderful of her to spend her time to come to us with some comments on one of the projects that we approved. I thought that she was really thorough and put together some really great comments. I find it's quite difficult to kind of toe the line of addressing each of those during our time at the commission when it's not necessarily the right time to address specific project comments. So I do know that city staff is thank you, exchanged details with her to follow up. So I just wanted to direct you, and then I didn't know if anyone had any further comments about how we might want to do this, just as I think that it's important that we help to educate in terms of, like, I'm not sure I mentioned the master plan process, which is a good point for her to get engaged currently to look at the draft master plan. So if we could send her some information on that. And then the site plan approval process and whatnot. The education piece, I think, is really important. I think it's sometimes difficult to do here at the dais. But if, staff, again, I know you have plenty to do, but provide with the correct materials, each of the people that do come to us, because I think it's important that we engage, and I don't want her to feel like she's left with, things going on deaf ears or anything, so.
We'll mention it tomorrow, and we'll mention your appreciation for her coming to the meeting today.
Thank you so much.
Through the chair, I appreciate you bringing that up. I think we may want to review our policy on when residents are noticed for projects. A project of a certain size, I think, regardless of how it's going to come to fruition, I think within a certain amount of feet need to be noticed. Even if they might not have an impact, at least they have a voice. They can come here and have a voice. I feel really bad that those residents behind the project on 9 Mile, really didn't have an opportunity to come to us as the project was discussed.
I think, sorry if
I was going to say, through the chair, they had multiple opportunities. It was noticed publicly, as it should have been, and I would just be very cautious, and I am like the person who runs 4-hour meetings because I want public comment, that if we overextend and start to get into extended notice or even step outside of extended notice or other policies, we could be opening ourselves up to liability for trying to influence something one way or another. So,
and I think too, and I think it's maybe
my only pause.
I think maybe just with the public notice process, maybe using that as an additional education opportunity to kind of say, hey, public notice project, here's what's coming, and then explaining as well, like, it's in the site, they're in the site confines, or this is what variances or what flexibility they're asking for, so that way people know, like, okay, this is what we can actually dictate. We can't tell them necessarily they can't necessarily do balconies in the back of the building. That's not something we can dictate and tell them. But, the masonry wall, that would have been great information to know in the conversation, because, again, we're kind of trying to use based on best practices, based on how we've gotten responses previously on what people would like. But in this case, it sounds like, oh, they would have loved masonry. So it's like, that's the kind of information that we would love to get feedback on. But the idea of that kind of a building going there, it needs to be more of just an education saying the property owner is doing what they're allowed to do in their property, but here's where it's flexible, kind of. That's kind of what I would almost like to see a little bit better.
Well, and I'm not looking to expand, I'm not looking to say we need to go out 1,500 feet from the project, but, the people that abut it should at least be the ones to be contacted.
So we do go above and beyond. I mean, we do have our extended notification process that goes above and beyond what's required by law. And I guess just kind of tacking on to what Commissioner Hackford says, when they're by right developments, we also don't have any say. I mean, so I think it's great that if residents have comments in reflection to a project, however, the actual part of the process that they need to be engaging in is the master plan process and the zoning update process, where we can make those changes. Because if we have a by right development, the property owner has rights to develop that property. And it's almost misleading to tell residents that they can come and change that process, because they can't, because it's a by right. So I think education is huge, and I think that really the engagement needs to happen at the appropriate time, though. So I caution it as well. And I think that we do a good job. And I want to say that we just went through that process of updating our notification process recently, within the last 5 years, so.
And I agree with everything that's been said. But I would also just want to make the point that I don't want to misconstrue the notification process, these meetings for public engagement. The development team needs to be doing public engagement or community engagement around their project to socialize their project with their surrounding neighbors. I think we have taken steps to influence that by doing enhanced noticing, which has driven folks to planning commission meetings with the expectation that they're going to be able to influence the development, which is not within our control. And so I think that there's an opportunity for a broader discussion around what the city of Ferndale would like to see community engagement consist of that's not during public comment in these meetings, because there's a limit to what we can do here. And I think that Kate has been, to Kate's point, you know, she wants to address every single comment, and God bless her for it. God bless her for it. But it is the only outlet they have.
Yeah.
And so again, the planning process and the community engagement process are becoming intertwined.
I understand that, but this is really the only opportunity
But
for,
it doesn't have to be, is my point.
true. I don't know if we have the resources to be able to provide another opportunity.
If the developer did it.
Well, yeah, but again, we rely on the developer to send letters, and sometimes they don't. And we encourage them to meet with residents, and a lot of times they don't. There's nothing that requires them to do certain things on certain projects. And while someone might not be able to influence us on a by right, they may be able to influence the developer by coming here, to have a chance to talk with the developer and say, hey, you're going to be my neighbor, be a good neighbor and do these things for us.
But also when the developer doesn't do that and the resident says that they should, then there can be created some like animosity towards the developer when they don't do it. So that I hear what you're saying, and I think that does happen frequently. We have some really great developers that work in Ferndale that do that. I think it can create some potential for animosity as well.
I think in this last case, the developer was very forthcoming and very welcoming to ideas and changes, things that he didn't have to do. And I think that there would have been opportunities, if residents had, that he would have supported their requests.
I mean, I got stopped at the post office about this project. I don't even know what it is, so I'm like, I'm on maternity leave, leave me alone.
But I do feel though, like, I would not leave it solely up to the developer though, because if I'm not saying developers do this or not, but if I was a developer, I would really want there to be no one at my meeting.
Yeah.
Because more often than not, the public is what will sink a project.
Yeah.
So why,
make it.
and so like, wouldn't it be in my best interest as a developer to be as quiet as possible to let this one just slip right through?
Yeah.
So I think there's examples of how other municipalities have handled community engagement, like required community engagement, that keeps tabs on the developer to ensure that they're doing their due diligence and engagement, while also, and having real educational opportunities so that the public is engaging in the planning process, understanding limitations of what we can and can't do in this room.
One thing that we have discussed in the past that I think could be helpful and is very public, but also would be on the onus of the developer, is providing signs at the site. I think that Rosie O'Grady's did a good job of it on Troy Street, although of course now that's going to be changing. However, I think it was really helpful to say this is coming here, but we could have requirements for certain specifics about a project to be located on site. And I've seen this implemented really well in other communities, and we've talked about it in the past, that we've just never put in the ordinance, that I think that could be a really easy kind of middle ground necessarily, but an improvement to our notification process.
I think we've talked about it when it comes to like noticing for rezonings or other changes, but I think it's a very different discussion than a by right development.
I've seen it for by rights, and I think that it works well in certain cities, but I mean, it's, but yes, that we would have to discuss that in detail, I think.
One thing I've noticed too is when we have the developers send out communications to residences, it's sometimes not even clear what, they present it in a way that really isn't clear about what's happening. And I had proposed to Roger and Kyle's former persons, Jordan and
You already forgot his name.
I did.
Just keep going.
Yeah, just keep going. So them, that the city create a template and provide the information, and it go on city letterhead so that they know that this is related to the city, and the city actually send them out so that we know that they're going out. I don't know if we have the resources to be able to do that.
We do it for certain developments, but,
I'll just, through the chair, there's a million ways to go about it. I've seen very strict, notice everybody within 1,000 feet, and then somebody be at 1,050 feet and get mad that their neighbor got it and they didn't. For where I worked, if you got notice, you could appeal it, so you couldn't go beyond, because then somebody would appeal it, and there was legality there. There's signposting, there's letters from the developers, there's staff attending neighborhood meetings, there's required neighborhood meetings. But I would say, one person came to you today, and I believe her, in terms of the masonry wall, but maybe the other three didn't show up because they liked the wall the way it was. And so there's another perspective there too, that maybe the other ones were actually okay with those things. But we can look at it and see if there's any way to improve public notice, posting, all those things.
I do believe that there was another resident that came, was it to the last meeting or two meetings ago?
I'm pretty sure the resident that she talked to.
Is probably the one that
the one
came,
that liked
yeah.
masonry, yeah.
all right.
Yeah, because I believe she
She
mentioned a lot of the same points that the first resident
Yeah.
mentioned.
Through the chair,
Yeah.
sorry. Last point though,
Usually I'm the
Oh,
one
hurry
that-
up, I said that we were going to be done by 9.
is that part of that masonry wall discussion was part of the compromise to move the building back, right? So you need bigger footings, it takes a bigger square footage to put in masonry than the fence. Of course, we have had feedback on other projects that residents prefer the vinyl because it's more residential, right? So that was discretion up here, right, based on feedback. And so we're not always perfect, but I think we put the right amount of consideration into that, and we got a broader outcome for the city by moving that building back, making it more pedestrian friendly. So
Agreed.
there was a trade-off on that.
Thank you
That's
for
it.
that point. All right, and with that, I will close the
Oh,
meeting
9 a.m.
at 9 o'clock.
Sorry.